Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it anywhere and everywhere. You can even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works.
Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can go ahead and distribute your podcast to Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are heard.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take the conversation with your fans to the next level, Q&A polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify for Podcasters, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and get started. Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to That's So Fringy podcast. I am Kristen.
I'm Rick.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are here for your midweek episode, your Fringy Morsel, if you will.
Dum, dum, dum. Dum,
dum, dum. So this week we have a topic brought to us by the fantastic Rick over here, who has a brain for this type of stuff, and I don't. So, ready, set, go.
So we wanted to talk about the kind of the looming crisis going on in the world right now. Obviously, on these Fringy Morsels, we like to do current events. So one of the most current events is the fact that the banks are crashing and the stock market's crashing. And for those of you that didn't know that, now you know. If anybody's paying attention to the financial market or inflation or gas prices, I'm pretty sure most of you out there know that there's some sort of crash incoming.
Something's fucky.
So there's lots of things going on in the world that are a bit suspicious. And so if you look at what is happening in the world right now, people are losing a bunch of money because they had their money in a bank in California, in the what's it called, Silicon Valley. They have their money in this bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and they are able to do business. Some people had billions of dollars in this bank because it's a lot of big startups and businesses that are trying to just succeed in the world, and that's who they bank with. Mm-hmm. And so as an example, TikTok is one of their businesses banking with them. And so what happens when a bank dissolves or goes bankrupt is all of your money that is in there goes away, because banks see your money as their assets. And so the reason I'm explaining this stuff tonight is because I've done a deep dive into all of this stuff. So we'll start by going back a little bit. We have to teach about how this whole money system, because you have to ask yourself, okay, if the economy crashes, what does that mean? In 2008, there was a crash. Back in, the 30s or 1929, they had, this huge stock market crash, and we went through the Great Depression. So you might hear this stuff at school, or you might have heard it, but how much attention do you really pay to what happened way back in the past? Mm-hmm. Well, you should pay attention to your past, because that is how you can learn and not repeat those things in the future. So what we need to understand is that everything that we know of money is completely controlled. There is what's called central banks, and every country has their own central bank. Now, they may be called different things, but they're all central banks. In America, we have the Federal Reserve. That's our central bank. And so that system has been created and it has been in place for a very long time. And the Federal Reserve actually came to be here in America back in 1913. So that's when the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation, became the United States government's central bank. Okay, so why is that important? Well, first of all, the first thing I said there is that it's a private business. It actually is not federal. So the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor do they have a reserve of money.
I didn't know any of that until not terribly long ago. I thought the Federal Reserve was government.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Silly
most
me.
people probably do think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can look this up. It's very easy to find. It's not a huge hidden secret. It's just
No.
everybody figures. You
Mm-hmm.
just figure that
Right.
the money that is being controlled by the government is owned by the government.
Right.
But the reality is it's not. In fact, the Federal Reserve is loaning and borrowing money back and forth, and then they're creating money all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, for those of you that don't know, what happens when you flood the market with new bills? It becomes a supply and demand issue for anybody that's taken economics classes or anything like that. If you flood the market with something, you're taking away the value from the things that are already there in the market. So the stacks of cash that are already out in the market, those are now reduced in value when you push out more money. Okay. But the Federal Reserve does this all the time. They're pushing out money into the public, and then that money is reducing the value of the money that's already there, which makes inflation go up because those costs are then, it hurts the businesses. The businesses now have to raise their prices. So
Which means that gets passed on to the consumer.
Right.
Which is how gas prices go through the roof. I don't know, maybe egg prices, chicken prices, like all that stuff goes through the roof.
Yeah, so it's not everything.
Yeah.
It's not really a factor of how much does that thing cost, It's a factor of how much money is in the market and how much value does it have. So the American dollar doesn't really have that much value anymore because they've pumped too much money into the system. So when you pump too much money into the system, you create a fault or an issue. And then that's what we're going through right now is the dollar is dying. And if you're not paying attention to this, hopefully after this episode you will be, because the dollar is dying and it's on life support right now, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
Right.
It's going away. And so this is something that people should be paying attention to, because our whole lives are controlled by money. The reason that we go to work, the reason that we do everything that we do is to get money so that we can then pay it back out to survive, whether that be your bills or your food or whatever, your electricity bills. And so they've got us locked in with money. If just think of a world for a second without any money, and that everybody just decided to, like, if I grew vegetables, I just decided to give some to you because you were my neighbor and you had some cows, and when you took it to the butcher, you just decided to give me some, and it was this barter program. Well, that's what they used to do back in the day. There was a bartering system. Well, anytime an empire comes in and takes over in history, what do? What did Caesar do? Well, he created his own money.
Coins.
Yeah, so you had these
And
coins,
taxes.
and you had to then give Caesar that money back in taxes. So he's giving you money, making you have it, and then you have to give it to him. And he sets the parameters for how much it's worth. So Caesar gets to choose how much that money's worth, and then he floods the market with money, and then he tells them how much of it they have to give him back. And then he controls the population by changing the amounts, the worths of things. You can control the population if they're getting out of control. You can pump more money into the market and flood it to where
and basically oppress the people even more.
Yeah, so if
So
people
it's like
are
levels of oppression.
exactly
Is how they use the money. So explain to everybody what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank closure. So what happens when you go to the bank? You deposit your money,
Mhm.
and then the bank is holding on to that. This is how I always thought it worked. You
Okay.
deposit your money, bank holds on to your money. When you go in and you want to get your money back, they give it back to you. False. That's not actually how it works at all.
So, is anybody out there in the listening land, have you ever gone to buy something that is, we'll say, like a car or a motorcycle? This happened to me with a motorcycle. I went to go buy a motorcycle, and I went in to get the cash. I was buying it off of Craigslist, and I told the guy, "Hey, I'm coming over to get that tomorrow. Does that work?" He says, "Yes." We worked out a price. I said, "Cool." And I went to go get my cash out because I was going to take it to him the next day. And luckily, I had done that the day before because they told me I couldn't get my money until the next day. And I was like, "What do you mean I can't get my money until the next day?" And she was like, "Well, we don't have it."
And it wasn't an exorbitant amount of money. I mean,
No,
we were talking
it was
$8,000.
It was $5,000. That's what I was pulling out of the bank because I already had some out. So
That's right.
I just needed $5,000, and it wasn't an exorbitant amount of money. That's all it was. And
And we
so
were like, wait, we have to wait until tomorrow to get our money out of our account. When we had a lot of money in there at the time, it was like, I don't
yeah, there was
understand.
plenty of money in there. It wasn't an issue of whether my account could handle it. It was
Yeah.
and that's where this problem begins. It's whether the bank's account can handle it. Okay, so everybody, as you said, thinks that when you deposit your money, they keep that money there in the bank in a vault somewhere. Well, that's bullshit. They don't do that at all. In fact, they take your money and then they actually use it to loan to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go in there and you deposit, say you deposit 10 grand, and then Kristen goes in, throws in 10 grand, and then I go in and I throw in 10 grand. We've got 30 grand in the bank. We all think individually. Well, then somebody else comes in and they want a $20,000 loan. Well, they take $20,000 of that money that they just got and they push it over there. They shuffle it over there. They create a debt. And so they actually get to double it. So they've created a debt and they have given them the money that they have to pay back. So it's a really complicated system, but just trust me, look it up, look at some videos, watch, figure out how money works and what this all looks like. So what it comes down to is you go into that bank in California and you find out that all of the overspending that they've done and overexerting and overloaning and all of that defaulting on different things, they got to the point where the bank was broke. So they didn't actually have any money in their coffers. And then here comes Joe Blow here and Joe Sue there. And here's all of these different people coming in looking for their money, and they try to pull their money. Well, this is called a run on the bank. This is when people go and they pull their money out, and all of that money being pulled out is what actually starts to deplete even more the bank. They get even more in debt because they didn't have any money, and then people heard that they didn't have any money, so they went to get their money What they don't realize is your money and their money are one and the same. And so when you pull out your money in large droves, that actually crashes that bank because you're taking your money back, but they've been using it.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have to give it all back, and they don't have it because they've been loaning it out to these people and loaning it out to those people and investing it here and investing it there. And pretty soon the bank and their big building that they have and all their corporate cars and all their corporate people and all of their employees, all of that stuff is paid for by you, the depositor. The person that is putting money into the bank, they're using, it's like a Ponzi scheme. They're using all of your money and just throwing it around and doing all of that. And so when a person decides, I'm going to go pull my money out of the bank because I don't trust it anymore, and then 50,000 people decide to do that, all of these banks start to crash. And that's what happened. And this is what's happening is people are beginning to realize that the value of the dollar is nothing now. So the stock market's crashing. We're beginning to realize that they've been lying to us about how they use our money. So the Central Bank of America is a private corporation run by the Rothschild family.
You've probably heard that name on here before.
Dun, dun,
So the
dun.
Rothschild family, what was that, Beth?
I said dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. She's
Yeah.
the musical genius behind tonight's episode.
I love that. So the Rothschild family, they decided that they needed to control the banks. And if they can control the banks, then they can control countries. Because once you get big enough as a bank, you're not just loaning money to people. Some of these huge banks, they're loaning money to countries. And countries are in debt to these big bankers. Well, if you found out that the United States government, one of the biggest, arguably strongest military, most influence in the entire world, if you found out that that Federal Reserve System that runs all of that money, that goes throughout the whole world, the petrodollar, as they call it, if you found out that that was run by a private company, wouldn't you be shocked?
Yes, I was.
Well, that's exactly what's happening.
Actually, so on one of our earlier episodes, we mentioned Dr. Laura Sanger. She's got a book called Roots of the Federal Reserve, and she explains it really, really well, how the Federal Reserve came to be. And there's another book, something Jekyll Island.
Yeah, The Creature of Jekyll Island.
Yeah, and that one's really good too, of explaining how the banking system works a little bit. But I did, so on Laura Sanger's Instagram page the other day, she put on a thing that caught my attention, and so I'm just going to quote what she says because it's awesome, and I had no idea. So she said, "I believe what we're seeing with the collapse of SVB, which is that Silicon Valley Bank, are signs that our monetary system is unraveling. Please be aware that there's a bail-in clause in the Dodd-Frank Act, which is DODD and then a dash Frank Act, that allows banks to rescue themselves from the edge of insolvency by seizing the assets of their depositors. When I discovered this through my research and writing my book, we closed all our accounts with Wells Fargo and transferred our money to credit unions. The too big to fail banks are still involved in reckless behavior with the derivatives market. There will be smaller banks, such as SVB, that collapse like Lehman Brothers did in 2008, but the greater threat is the TBTF, so that was the too big to fail banks, bailing themselves out with depositors' money. This happened in Cyprus back in 2013, causing great loss for depositors, driving some to commit suicide." I had no idea that the Dodd-Frank Act was a thing, but it basically, I don't know if you guys understood the gravity, what I said at that beginning part, but these banks are allowed to rescue themselves with your money. So if they're getting to the place where they are on the verge of being on the edge of insolvency, they can take your money to bail themselves out.
No,
and that's exactly what happened with SVB.
It's better than that. You guys want to go down another rabbit hole?
Well, this is just a morsel, Rick.
So the Creature of Jekyll Island book talks about how the Federal Reserve is a big trick, and it's all real. This dude has done a lot of research, and he's very smart, and he explains everything in the book so perfectly. But chapter 2, he talks exactly about this. The game is called bailout. This is how they continue to save themselves, and they continue to get money, and they continue to get money, and they grow as an organism. And he talks all about how they do it. And so I would highly recommend, if you don't know anything about finances and you want to learn the real truth about finances, get that book. But
well, and it's like we've said before, with knowledge is the power. The knowledge is how we rescue ourselves from being enslaved. And they're banking on the fact that people have their head in the sand and they don't want to learn this information, because this information is out there. There's books that are written so well that have all of this stuff laid out, and I had no idea how it all worked. I'm like, oh, this is so terrible. Rick's like, yep. Yep, it's pretty bad. But so this information is out there, but people have to look for it. People have to be willing to pull their head out of the sand and dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't dig in on Google. I mean,
Yes.
I think they make the system so complicated because they don't want you to figure it out. They don't want you to know the loopholes. They don't want you to know the clauses that are in there. When you sign that long, ridiculous 30-page document, when you buy a car or you buy a house, you don't read all that. Nobody reads all that. But it's designed that way for a reason, in my opinion.
Especially now with electronic signatures, man, you just scroll to the end of it. You don't even have to flip a page. You literally just click the box that you read it. I mean, there's stuff in there that would blow everybody's mind.
Yeah, it's called Babylonian black magic.
Yeah.
And it's how they trick your mind by keeping you so dumb where they can do whatever they want to do, because you can't figure out the math. You can't figure out how the system works because it's so complicated. Well, it's actually not that complicated. So what I was saying before is it gets more interesting is they are able to, so we didn't talk about the FDIC, which we have to talk about. So the FDIC is who insures your money. So the FDIC is insuring your money, and the way that works is these banks, they go in and they look at how many people they have and what's their balance. So basically, how much money do they have for all of those depositors, and then they take a percentage of that, and that's the amount of money that bank has to pay into an account to the FDIC. So
that's how much that bank has to pay for insurance, basically.
Yeah, so that's a bank paying for coverage of your money. So they're taking that money and they're paying it. Well, what are they paying it with? Well, they're paying it with your money because that's all that they have. They have your money. They might have had some capital at the beginning to get started, but eventually they run on your money. So, and how do they do that? By taxes and fees and all of these different hidden charges and things like that. They can make a ton of money. Wells Fargo can make a ton of money off of just hidden fees here and there on every account, if you think about the math. And so anyway, that's what they do. They push that cost down to you, and then they pay that money. Well, then what happens, and this is the scary part, is they will take that money and they will sell it to the federal government, to the Congress. Basically, the Congress will give them the Treasury will give them a Treasury note, or basically a IOU that says, we'll pay this back. And then the government, Congress, who can declare war and use that money to, I don't know, send it over to Ukraine or anything like that. I mean, they just sent billions of dollars over to Ukraine. And that type of money is coming from, guess where? The FDIC fund. The FDIC fund is getting stolen and there's like an IOU in this FDIC fund because they don't think that this is ever going to happen. They're so cocky. They don't think that this is ever going to happen, that we're all going to do a run on the banks and say, show me my money. I want to see it in cold hard cash on the counter right now. They can't come up with it. And they're so cocky that they don't think that this is ever going to happen, that people aren't going to run on the bank like this and completely shut down the system. Well, that's what's happening. People are. They don't trust the government anymore. They don't want their money in the banks anymore. And everybody's pulling their money out. And it's coming time to where these banks can't pay. And then Congress is sending billions over to Ukraine. And so then the banks go to Congress and say, we need you to bail us out. And they're like, yeah, we'll cover it. We'll cover it. Well, they can't because they already sent it to Ukraine. So you've got this nasty cycle that they've been doing. And this isn't just about Ukraine, or they've been doing this for a very long time.
Well, since when did the Federal Reserve start?
1913.
Which, again, is an interesting timeline when you look at the timeline of how things have transpired. Early 1900s is big on that timeline.
Yeah, it's been constantly an issue since then. And there's, they had this meeting on Jekyll Island where and you can get this book, but in Georgia, off the coast of Georgia, they had this meeting. They had this big plan. All of these big rich people had their minions go there and have the negotiations and figure out how it was going to work. And there was a couple people that were just like, nah, I don't want to do that. It was like, I think 3 or 4 people that were like, I think it was 3 people that did not want this Federal Reserve System. They saw through the lies and they were like, no, this is nefarious. Something's wrong here. And they didn't want to do it. And so they got rid of them because each and every one of those guys that were opposed to the Federal Reserve, they were on the Titanic. All 3 of those dudes were on the Titanic and went down with the Titanic.
Dun, dun, dun.
And when was
That's
the
another
Titanic?
rabbit hole.
That was 1912, right? Titanic.
Correct.
And then it was like 1913, I guess, when the Federal Reserve came out and started. I don't know.
I mean, the dominoes that started between, 1900 to 1920, 30 is incredible when you start linking all of this stuff together, which hopefully we're helping do that for you, because there's a lot of things that happened around that time that kind of changed the course of the United States forever, really.
Yeah, and if
so do your research.
Yep, do your research. If you go look at the list of who was on the Titanic and who survived the crash, J.P. Morgan was one of them. He was all for the Federal Reserve, all for it. So, yeah.
He's made a little bit of money off of it, I think.
I think so.
A little bit. It is also interesting that not every country has a central bank. There are a few that said, no, we're not doing this. So I think Iraq was actually one of them.
Oh, weird.
Super interesting.
Yeah, when you look into this stuff, guys, you find out that the countries that have been crushed under the foot of the United States of America's military industrial complex have been those that were opposing the bloodlines.
Yep.
You don't oppose the bloodlines or you get crushed. So,
wow. That sounds like a rap song.
Dang. I'm going to have to come up with something. We'll put something together. I'll rap that out.
Get on your AI chatbot. They'll do it for you.
There you go.
There you go.
I'll go talk to Lilith. She's probably got some answers for me.
Lilith, stop it.
That was a Fringy throwback.
Oh.
All right, you guys. This is a Fringy Morsel. We don't want to keep you too much longer because this is a midweek. Stay tuned for Flat Earth Dave. Can't tell you how excited
Sunday,
I am.
Flat Earth Dave.
Yeah.
Flat Earth Dave.
It's going to be awesome.
We love you.
You guys are going to love it.
I so profusely apologize. I called him Flat Earth Dan.
Did you?
I did on accident. Not to him, but I did.
I remember.
I did that.
All right, you guys, you're the best. Thank you for coming and listening. Again, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, write a review, all of those
Send us messages.
Things. We love to hear from you people.
We really do. We're not jesting. We really do.
We wouldn't jest you.
All right, you guys, we're That's So Fringy Podcast. I'm Rick.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are out of here.
See ya.